Hello and welcome to episode 148 of the Money to the Masses podcast with your resident expert as always, Damien Fay, and me, Andy Leaks. Damien, how you doing?
Good, Andy. We we might as well go straight into something. There's a bit of good news for us, as we won a podcast award last week, didn't we?
Yay, go us.
Go us. Go team Andy and Damien. Yeah, we won a podcast award. For those of you who don't know, that there are awards out there for things like this that we do. Believe it or not, people do value what this shows like this. And there was a group of money bloggers who they get, actually it's quite a big group, and they end up getting an award ceremony sponsored by lots of big brands that you know, and they do a podcast category for the best money podcast in the UK. And we got the runner up,
and we won it.
No, we didn't win it. We became runner up. Yeah. Did you think we'd won it?
No, I knew we hadn't, but I thought the way you were building it up. No, I think runner-up is good enough in that space. There's obviously lots of good podcasts out there. I mean, we know and our listeners know we're the best, but it's fine if...
Actually, the one that came first was Pete Matthew. For people out there who listen, Pete, who does Meaningful Money, is a good friend of mine and of this show. And so if there's anybody to come runner-up to, then I'm more than happy for it to be Pete. So well done to him. And
absolutely, good guy.
He's a really good guy. If you haven't listened to his podcast, then do go and have a listen. Yeah, so that was quite a nice little nod. I didn't go to collect the prize, but I was otherwise engaged. But nonetheless, it was good to win it, Andy.
Good.
Well, okay. The runner-up slot anyway. So that was this week. Apart from that, I've not got anything exciting to tell you. It's been head down. And I've been doing a hell of a lot of writing this week, which has been quite exciting. And we launched a new calculator on Money to the Masses, which was to do with income tax. So an income tax calculator that tells you how much your take-home pay will be. So we're doing a lot of that stuff. And there's the reason we do it now, just as an aside, is that at this point of the year, it leads up to Christmas, and the beginning of the year is always the biggest time for money. So we have to do a lot of work ahead of that. So there's lots of content out there for you guys to read at the point where you are most engaged. So that's what we've been doing. Anything else you've been doing, Andy, before we move on?
Yeah, not really much this last week. I've been doing lots of sort of homeworky projects and things with my eldest girl. She's doing Egypt at the moment. That's their category that they've chosen at school. So we've been building model pyramids and doing hieroglyphics and all sorts of stuff like that. So yeah, I've been a bit of like a Blue Peter, sort of, here's what I made earlier.
Oh, good. I mean, Egypt was one of my favourite things when I was at school, and like most parents, we all try not to get too involved, but we do, and then pass off our own work as our children's, and the teacher sees through it. So anyway, what's on the show this week? We got the usual three pieces. One of them was inspired by a piece of post that I got through the letterbox this week. Smart meters. I got a letter from my energy provider saying that I could have a smart meter, and to call them to arrange its installation. So I'm going to talk about them, because do we have to have them? Are they any good, and do they save you money? I want to go through my decision process, because obviously I thought about, well, do I really want one? And I'll tell you what my decision was. The next piece is about credit cards. And if you have a credit card that you no longer use because you don't need it and you've cleared the balance, for example, should you ditch it or should you keep it? It's one of those questions that most people don't know the answer to, so I'm going to cover that. And last but no means least, I'm going to touch upon Ryanair, because there's lots of people out there who have been affected by naughty Ryanair, cancelling flights because they messed up holiday for, I think it's holiday for pilots, I think the story was. I tended to switch off because I don't particularly like the guy who runs it. He's
Michael O'Leary, is it? That's exactly what it is. They've said it's holiday, but I think the story is yet to fully unravel. I think there's something a bit more sort of deep-seated than what they're letting on. So I think that story will play out.
Well, I'm sure I saw that they'd cancelled 40,000 flights or something today. I mean, I'm sure that was the figure. I may have got that wrong, but it's a hell of a lot. And to be honest with you, that basically means there are 40,000. There's thousands of people who have been affected. So I'm going to talk about very briefly what that means, and if you're caught up in that, what are the rules around compensation and your actual travel, and what Ryanair's obligations, and also the lessons to be learned from it. So let's start.
Great. What we're going to start with. So we've got smart meters, we've got credit cards, and we've got Ryanair. What should we do first?
Let's go smart meters, Andy. Now, the smart meter thing, unless if you've been in a cave and don't have energy, bills at all, then this might pass you by. But you might have heard those adverts where people go on about gas and lecky and smart meters. A really annoying campaign.
Do you know what's really... Can I tell you something really quickly and briefly about that advert? Do you know what's really funny? When I grew up at school, I had a mate called Gaz, short for Gary, and I had a mate called Lecky, and his name was Mark Lecky. So they were literally, Gaz and Lecky were two of my best friends. And now I see this advert with Gaz and Lecky, and it just makes me laugh.
Is it you've just realised that they were actually imaginary?
Yeah.
Gaz and Lecky, they didn't really exist. Oh,
Anyway, let's not do the advertising for British Gas or wherever it is.
No, so yeah, less of that. But what's happening is that the government is wanting smart meters in our homes because obviously, as you all know, we have to climb under the stairs or open cupboards. We have to give meter readings ourselves, and our bills are based on estimations. And what they want to do is make the market more consumer friendly, encourage people to switch and to try and save energy. Because obviously, if we save energy as well, it puts less pressure on the national grid, which probably at some point in the not too distant future will collapse if we all have electric cars. Now, the point of this project, there's apparently £11 billion that's been spent on this project to install these meters into 26 million homes, which are big numbers. And the way it works is that you'll get an engineer from your energy company will come in and fit smart meters into your gas and electricity. And what will then happen, it will monitor your usage live and apparently then send readings via the radio waves to your utility company. So you don't have to give meter readings. In fact, they should be live and accurate. But you also get a little handheld device which you can put in your kitchen or wherever you want to, and then you can see your usage. And now, as an aside, I remember quite a few years ago installing something like this. Not changing my meter from the old archaic one to a smart meter, but you could get a monitoring device.
That's
and
right.
I'd
With
put
magnets and things like that.
Yeah, and you put it. I actually put it on my electricity supply, and it was absolute pain to fix. But once I did fix it, it was amazing about how much it made you aware of the energy you use. So I was going around just turning things on and off to see what happened. I mean, if you boil a kettle, I mean, blimey. It goes, you see the thing go through the roof. The other one that was interesting was the overhead LED lights. Well, not LED, but the halogen version, because LEDs use less electricity. But you've got spotlights.
Yeah.
They use so much electricity. So I do tend to now use lamps. Like I would have lamps in the room anyway, because sometimes having the overhead lights is a bit much, isn't it? So, but using lamps actually uses less electricity. So it is quite good. It does help you. And apparently, by having these new smart meters, it will encourage people to be a little bit more energy conscious, and it will save them £20 a year. Now, that doesn't seem anything too great to shout about, but the idea is they want us to be more conscious about switching and therefore save up to £400 a year. Now, should we all do it? The point is that it's technically free, and if you could see me, I'm doing that annoying inverted commas thing with my fingers, because the cost of installing it is technically paid for by us, even though it's not explicitly paid for when you actually have it installed. Our energy bills are £420 higher as a result of this campaign and this £11 billion project. So we are already paying for having smart meters in effect, even if you don't have one installed. So the decision you've got is, do we have one installed? I looked at the letter and my wife said, oh, we're going to do that then. And it seems to be a no-brainer, because if you can get a meter that makes you smarter energy use and hopefully help you to then switch, why wouldn't you? But I had an inkling that it wasn't as good as it's made out to be. And of course, I looked into it, did a bit of digging. Of course, that was the first point I mentioned there. That actually, even if you don't do it, there's no obligation. By the way, it's not compulsory to do this. It's optional, and they want to get it into every house. But at the moment, I think it's only about 20% of houses that have got the smart meter and agreed to have it installed. So you don't have to. There is obviously the pain of having an engineer come around, and you know what they're like. They never come around when you want them to. But like I said, you're already kind of paying, so you think, why wouldn't you? Now, the cons of doing this are that they aren't foolproof. They do send occasionally errors about your usage. Someone points out that the security of these things isn't perfect, so that people could intercept your meter readings. Why on earth anyone want to intercept your meter readings, I'm not quite sure. So please tweeting the answers if you know why I should be worried about someone intercepting them. But the big thing I remember hearing was about the next generation smart meters. Now, we're currently on the first generation smart meters, and the second generation were supposed to have arrived, and they're already 2 years late. And the problem we've got, which came out recently, there's a bit of an article in one of the newspapers about an old boy who was complaining. He was a guy who switched his energy continuously to save money. And he was retired, so he probably didn't have a lot better to do, to be fair. And because there is a law of diminishing returns if you keep switching. I've talked about it before. But he was switching his energy bills, being very conscientious. The problem with a lot of these smart meters is that your energy company will install a smart meter that sends them a meter reading. But if you switch energy supplier, it will mean more than likely you will have to have another smart meter installed by your new energy supplier. So it actually makes switching energy providers far more difficult. And if the smart meter doesn't stop working, what it will likely do is lose some of the functionality. And so while the meter it might give you a reading when you look at your handheld part of the setup that says how many kilowatts of energy you're using, but it won't tell you the cost because it's no longer tied up to the tariff that you're on your new provider. So, I mean, that's a bit of a problem. So this whole idea of smart meters may be wonderful and fantastic. It's not seemingly playing out that way, especially if you start to switch energy providers, which is what we're meant to be doing. Now, apparently, when the second generation smart meters come, that's going to resolve that problem because there's meant to be a new infrastructure that's going to allow these things, I think, to be reprogrammed in some wireless way that will mean they will work on a common infrastructure across all the providers. So, but like I say, that's overdue. So the point of all of this is the smart meter idea. You are paying for it, so you kind of might as well have it. But if you're like me and can't be doing with waiting in all day for someone to come and install something that probably won't work anyway in the way that you want it to, and I'd like to think I was fairly energy conscious, and there's going to be a next generation that will be better and they'll work properly when you switch, then I'm going to hold out for the second generation of these things. That's my personal opinion. I am technically still paying for the first generation, but I'm going to hang out for the second generation.
Yeah. So do you do a similar thing with your phones?
Do you know what? I don't. I'm terrible with technology. I'm not one of these people who has to keep getting the latest one. I keep mine. I should take a photo of things like my phone, and which is quite difficult taking a photo of your phone with your phone. But I put mine in like a brick. I buy the case that means you could drop it off the top of a tower block and it'd be okay, because I just don't look after things in that way. And so when I get these nice shiny slick looking products, then like an iPhone for example, it just ends up looking like my first phone that you had when you were a kid, that was just this indestructible brick. So I don't place much value on getting the latest thing, unfortunately, but I know a lot of people do, so I don't rush to get them. But sometimes I do wait for sometimes it does pay, doesn't it, Andy, to wait for things to go wrong. Like I have not updated my iPhone because everybody's complaining about they've updated theirs and the software has stopped all their apps working. The new iOS 11, I think it is. So yeah. I am one of those people who waits for everybody else to make the mistake, and then I think, yeah, do you know what? I now might jump. What about you?
Yeah, I'm exactly the same. As I've got older, I think I've got grumpier and maybe just a bit more patient as well. When I was younger, I used to want the next best thing. You know, I want it now. But yeah, no, I've not upgraded my phone for a good couple of years now, and I'm on the cheapest tariff I've ever been on, and I'm quite enjoying that. So yeah, I think like you with the smart meters, I'm gonna see it out. I've only just switched anyway through using the Flipper service that we talked about maybe about 6 months ago, and I'm enjoying that. And yeah, I think I'll be looking at the next generation myself.
Yeah, but it's interesting you said about the phone before we move on and saving money. I kept my phone handset for so long on an older generation of iPhone because I was able to then go onto a tariff that only cost me £10 a month because it was a SIM-only deal. It was fantastic. I didn't really want to leave it, but it got to the point where the phone became almost a brick in itself because of the updates in terms of software. I'm convinced they make it so clunky and so that the old phones can't cope because they haven't got enough RAM or whatever. So they end up becoming so slow to become frustrating to use that forces you to upgrade.
Good. We're going to talk about credit cards and whether you should ditch them.
Yeah, ditching credit cards, Andy. Now, at some point in life that we all get there, whether we've paid off our credit card or whether we have multiple credit cards where we've been switching around on 0% deals or having trying to pay down different debts, you will get to the point where you have a credit card that doesn't have any balance on it. So you have your credit limit and you have that fully available, but you've not used any of it. So should you close that or should you leave it open? And it's one of those things that you ponder when it comes along, and you don't actually know what the correct answer is. So I just want to run through what the pros and cons of either keeping it or closing it are, because the reason you probably not found an answer to that conundrum is there's not a definitive answer. It's not a simple close or keep. It depends what you want. So if you think about keeping, one of the reasons to keep the credit card open, even though you're not using it and you've already got, say, another credit card, is that if you keep it, it gives you access to credit. So you've got an emergency fund. Your boiler blows up. I always talk about boilers blowing up, but I think it's because I'm paranoid. Mine's about to. But if I really think it does, Andy. Every day I have a shower. I stand in there and I think, oh, has that gone a little bit colder? Then do you know when you get that hot cold? I periodically have British Gas coming out and fixing my boiler. I got to the point where I was having them. It was almost felt like daily. I always do them on first name terms. Some of the people, but yeah. So if your boiler blows up, then you've got access to credit to be able to fix it. And of course, one of the other things, if you keep it open, then sometimes you get offers, existing customer offers. What they're trying to do is entice you to start using it again. So they might give you a nice 0% balance transfer deal because you're an existing customer. So again, that's another reason why you might want to keep it open. And they may give you cashbacks and rewards. So there are some people out there who have a card that they may have cleared the balance by moving it off, but the card that now has a balance, they might have some good cashback and rewards. So they do their shopping and clear the balance every month, but they rack up the points or rewards. Now, I personally hate that. I just don't have the self-control or willpower to ensure that I can keep that going without getting into huge amounts of debt, because it's actually rigged for you to fail, isn't it? They're setting you up so you don't clear it, and that is another reason to keep it if you really are into that sort of thing. And also, if this credit card is the only one you've got access that you can spend, for example, on, then it is handy for Section 75 consumer protection if you buy something, which we'll mention later on if you're about flights, actually. So it's a good little teaser there, because if you have a 0% balance transfer that you've done, you don't want to spend on that card because it will actually start to accrue you interest. So you want it's quite handy to have this other card to keep it open to do a bit of spending on if you just need to. Now, on the flip side, if you cancel the card, then the first thing it does is decrease your chance of fraud. So if it doesn't exist, it's less likely that you are going to have somebody steal your identity or that card. The other thing is that you can become a new customer again of the credit card company, and some of them have there's various dates at which you become a new customer for a bank. I didn't know this until I was looking into it today.
I knew of this, but only through experience, by being contacted by them and realising that I'd become effectively eligible for new customer deals as opposed to existing customer deals, which are different things apparently. Yeah, so I've recently found this out.
Yeah, see, and apparently what happens is that you will become a new customer at some point because they forget about you. And for different institutions, it's different lengths of time. So different banks and credit card companies will have different time frames that stipulate you are a new customer, and some of them are as short as 6 months. So within 6 months of closing that account, they might start sending you things for a new customer deal, which typically new customer deals on nearly anything are far better than the existing ones. A good example is every year I play the game with the people like the AA and the RAC, try and get me to renew and say I can't have a better deal than 120 or 150 quid or whatever it is, and then you go, but new customers can have it at £100, and they go, okay, you can have it at £100. It's the same thing every year. You play this silly game. You always say to them, why do we do this? And I think they just like the chat.
Do you know, Damien, talking about that, I just had my car serviced. I did what they call a major service. You can have minor and major services. You normally switch them each year. I've just found out that from doing my major service this year that I've just qualified for a year's worth of free European, not just UK, roadside assistance. And Yeah, didn't even know that came with the service. So I'm going to have to investigate and cancel what I've currently got because, yeah, there we go.
Well, you say that, Andy. That's quite interesting because there is. I have to try and find it. If I forget to do this, people should tweet me and I will go and find the service. But there was a service I remember a few years back that tried to pull together all the benefits on all the cards and things that exist out there for that very reason that you're saying, that you can very quickly have duplicate benefits on duplicate products. So like you've got car insurance, you said, oh, I need to cancel the roadside recovery because you're getting free roadside recovery. And actually, if you have different credit cards or bank accounts and things like that, you can very quickly be paying for things that you've already got, then therefore you won't ever be able to make a claim or use. And this service, and I can't remember the name, I don't know why I'm really talking about it, to be frank, but this service, I'll try and find it. This service, you could put in what you've got and it would tell you if you what freebies doubling you had. Up. Yeah, with your doubling up on what freebies you had. But the last thing that I wanted to come back on is credit score, because everyone says, what would it do for my credit score if I cancel that credit card, or should I keep it open? And again, the jury is slightly out on this because different credit card companies view outstanding credit balance, not outstanding balances, but available credit in different ways. So, for example, if you have masses of available credits, you're not using it, you've got a credit line you could access, a credit card company wouldn't necessarily think that's a great thing to give you anymore because you've already got a lot that you could use, and therefore you could suddenly max out all of it, including your new one with them, and you'll probably not pay it back. Equally, if you have none, for example, you don't have a credit history at all, then they probably won't lend to you because there's no evidence you can pay stuff back. Or if you have maxed out your cards, then the chances are they probably won't want to lend you money either because they think, well, he's going to just max this out and he's not very good at managing debt. So there is a rough rule, it seems to be, that if you can keep your credit to about 25% of your overall availability, that is probably good for your credit rating. So there is an argument that if you've got a card that can mean that your overall usage of credit is fairly low, then it will be good for your credit rating. Because if you suddenly cancelled all your cards and then you got down to just the one that you maxed out with a balance transfer, then suddenly you are up to 100% of your possible credit availability, and that won't be good when you go and try and use other credit cards or apply for other credit cards, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So for me personally, you do that sum. If it works out for you, I would probably leave it open.
Interestingly, I was just contacted by one of my old card providers. I often switch for 0% deals when I can and when I need to. And one of my old card providers, Sainsbury's, don't mind mentioning them, they sent me a letter in the post, and I thought it was quite responsible of them. And they very clearly set out in their letter that they wanted to close my account down because I hadn't used it for over 2 years. They saw no reason to keep it open because of fraud and everything else, and that if I was happy and I needed to do nothing more, that I didn't need to respond. If they hadn't heard from me within 30 days, then they would do that for me, which I think is, it's fair enough.
Yeah, it is quite good, actually. I think it is responsible. I'm all for a bit of responsible lending. I think we're way too irresponsible. There's too much credit. As an aside, that is going to be a theme of one of my many videos that I'm doing. If you've not seen the videos I'm doing at the moment on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, they're also going on Twitter, where I'm doing 100 videos in 100 days, all 1 minute long max, some less. And it's called the We Need to Talk About Money series. And if you search the hashtag We Need to Talk About Money, you will see them all. I'm doing a whole load of them, and they're going down a storm. We're getting a lot of interaction. Please, 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 if you're listening to this podcast, go and have a look at them. Again, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, or Instagram. And please share them and like them. And if you follow our page and like the Money to the Masses page, it means you will see them each day. And again, they're only 60 seconds long, but you'll learn something from each of them.
You will indeed, and I'm not just saying this, but they are so good. They're sort of real shareable content. They're little nugget, bite-sized things that just little reminders. A lot of the stuff, it's the sort of stuff that you forget, or that you think, I must remember that. Or there was one particular one that I loved about schooling and how basically to focus on the older generation in terms of educating people about money, and I just thought that was so good, and I shared it, and immediately my mum texted me back and said, that was really good, I think Damien's onto something there, and she shared it, and that's really what you want, isn't it? It's perfect.
It is, and some of the stuff is, I cover lots of topics. Investing, I did one on a very clever trick to clear your debt quicker and pay thousands of pounds less interest and knock up to 28 years off of your repayments, and things like that people don't realise about how to think about money, how to apply ideas, and some of it's about investing. Like I say, I've got a good one coming up about how being good with money is nothing to do with being clever in your intelligence, and it's just getting people to be. What we want is to get people talking about money by doing this, and people sharing and making their comments. One about, I did something about wills on there, that we can make a difference to people when people start having conversations about money more widely. We learn from each other, but more importantly, it stops us being exploited by the nasty, nasty financial services people who, not all of them are bad, but the bad ones. Right, yeah. Ryanair.
Yes, Ryanair. What's going on?
Well, the short thing, we mentioned it earlier, didn't we, Andy, that they have been naughty and cancelling flights, but it's stitching people up. And, of course, people are wondering, what can they do? What does it mean? So, I mean, I've been on a Ryanair flight, and there is Ryanair that used to play the stupid bugle-type noise, didn't it, when they landed, when they were on time?
I've never been on a Ryanair flight, and that's not because I'm a snobby. I have been on plenty of EasyJet. It just seems to be the destinations I go, Ryanair doesn't fly. So
you mean
I don't know.
The better class ones that you go to?
What EasyJet?
You need to go on a few more stag do's then, Andy. I mean, yeah. I tell you what, I have to say with Ryanair, it just felt like flying in a Portaloo. It had like plastic seats that when the guy 2 seats along from me moved, I seemed to move as well. It was, and I'm not particularly tall either. So my poor friend Kev, who's 6'3", he looked like he was basically chewing his kneecaps for the entire journey, where their leg room was so squashed. It's one of the few times in life where you're very smug about being relatively short. But anyway, Ryanair have cancelled lots of flights, and so people are wondering, what does it mean for them? So the first thing to say, if anybody, not just Ryanair, if you get a flight that is cancelled more than 2 weeks before you were due to take it, then you won't get any compensation. That isn't going to happen. So you can forget that. So if your flight in the future by Ryanair is going to be cancelled, you won't get compensation. What you will get is a full refund, or you can choose to have an alternative flight. And I'll come back to that bit in a minute. But if your flight is cancelled within 2 weeks of your departure, then you are entitled to compensation. And it can vary between £110 and £355. And it depends on the length of the journey that you're going to take. So if you go in, you can find the rules if you Google them. And if you are going to make a complaint, then there is a good thing that Martin Lewis's website actually do. It isn't him. It's called Resolver. And it's a service that basically merges, it's like super complaints. They merge all the complaints of people together to a company and bash them over there to Ryanair, British Gas, whoever, and try by weight of numbers to get them resolved. And it's quite a clever idea. It wasn't Martin Lewis who created it. It was another, just a guy created it in his bedroom. Martin Lewis has jumped on board, I think, of a way of his next thing to try and make money. And the way they apparently make money, as an aside, is that they don't make money from your complaint, or they certainly didn't when they initially set it up. They made money by anonymous data about complaint handling and everything like that they could sell back to companies, because obviously if you have millions of complaints going through and whether they're being resolved, etc., or whatever, that's valuable to companies. But anyway, if you the very strange thing actually, so if you can have a refund, great, or you can have a flight, and then the flight rules are that you can have a flight at your choice. It's a preference of when you want it in the future, or it can be the next convenient basically flight from Ryanair. The next one Ryanair can get you on. It's your choice, so you don't have to have that. But the rather strange thing is that it's the flight that's at the earliest opportunity, and it's when these definitions come around in all these rules that it becomes a little bit grey. So what does that even mean, for starters? And the next bit is that obviously you can have a flight where you could potentially be put on a rival's airline. So you could go onto another rival's airline, not Ryanair. But for them to do that, it has to be if there's a significant time difference between the rival airline's flight going and Ryanair. So you'd be hanging around for Ryanair, but there's another rival coming a significant time beforehand, then you can be put on that plane. But again, they don't define what significant time means, so I think it's fairly woolly on that one. And there's also the idea that that someone like Ryanair would have to pay the extra costs incurred by you, because let's say, for example, you were due to fly and then you had to be put into accommodation or something overnight or whatever because of the problems you've had. There's a slightly odd rule here that if you end up being put on a flight and you end up arriving earlier than you were scheduled to, which could theoretically happen, then you won't actually get any of those costs back. So presumably if you did arrive early, you'd be happy anyway, and you probably wouldn't have had to incur too many extra costs. But if you did somehow, then they won't pay those either. So those are the quick rules around what will happen if you get stung by any airline who decides to cancel their flights. From a general rule and sort of lessons learned, book your travel insurance when you book your flights, because don't forget that you need... One of the big things about travel insurance is it covers you from the point that when you book as much as when you actually travel. So if something goes wrong and they cancel flights or you become ill or anything like that, that means you might not be able to go on holiday, then your travel insurance could pay out. And one of the biggest ones is strikes. Now, we all know there have been plenty of strikes going on. British Airways have had a cabin crew strike that's been going on for quite some time. I think that may have stopped now. But if that suddenly gets announced and you haven't bought your travel insurance and you suddenly, I'll best buy it, but it's already been told that it's going to happen, the strike, then you won't be able to make a claim. So remember, do that. The other thing is perhaps have a look out for the terms on your travel insurance. So there's something called consequential losses, which is a rather odd term, but it's the consequence of a flight cancellation. That means that you couldn't pay for your hotel or a car, you'd have to cancel those. Then you would incur those charges, wouldn't you? Just because it's obviously not the hotel's fault you're not going, so they would probably still charge you. But you can have travel insurance that will obviously pay out for those costs, but it needs to have that consequential loss element in it. And also, you need to pick a travel insurance that has preferably where there's a cancellation for any reason, because some of them stipulate what the cancellations, what types of cancellation they will cover. So, for example, it may be a cancellation due to the airline's error, or it could just be a cancellation for any reason. Obviously, the broader any terms and conditions are, the better. And also, finally, book flights with your credit card, because if you book a flight with your credit card, then you end up having Section 75 protection under the Consumer Credit Act, which means, therefore, if you can't fly, you'll be able to potentially put a claim against your credit card company. But do remember that it isn't the full amount you have to put on the credit card. It can be anything that you put on your credit card, and it will, as long as the purchase price is between £100 and £30,000. So yeah, you will be covered if you put some money on there. So there you go, Andy. That was a quick whistle stop tour of what would happen if your flight was cancelled, and if it is cancelled, don't fly with them again. Yeah,
absolutely. I think Ryanair are going to be struggling going forward, but they've kind of made their bed there, haven't they? So we'll see how that one plays out.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would personally, if I had something like that, I wouldn't use an airline again. I mean, it's easy to say that. We've all had... Actually, what am I talking about? Ignore me. If you listen to this podcast, ignore me. Don't you remember I had the Vueling, lost my suitcase when I went to Barcelona. Yeah. And 2 years later, I flew on Vueling to Barcelona again. So, Damien, you're just talking nonsense. Just get over yourself. Anyway, right, we're done. Let's leave reviews.
On that bombshell. Yeah, we've had some reviews coming in, and that's obviously on the back of us pleading and begging last week. So thank you for that. Do keep them rolling in. It means we go way up in the charts, and it means we can help more people. If you want to contact Damien, do so at the normal places, podcast@moneytothemasses.com, or on Twitter. Damien loves to hear about your questions and things on Twitter, and we'll often answer them, or if not, personally via Twitter, certainly on this podcast. It is at Money to the Masses with the number 2. Damien, we're done, I think.
We are done, Andy, for another week. So until next time.
Don't forget to claim your free copy of Damien's best-selling book, The 30-Day Money Plan. Sort your finances in just 5 minutes a day, worth $4.99. Just go to moneytothemasses.com/podcast to find out how.